My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm 68 years old, and for 30 long years, I lived with a question that never let me sleep. Every single night, no matter the weather, no matter how tired he was, my husband, Richard, would put on his brown jacket, grab his keys, and say the same thing. "Don't wait up, Evie. I'll be back soon." At first, I didn't think much of it. Men need space, right? Maybe he met friends. Maybe he took late drives to clear his head. I didn't want to be that nagging wife. I trusted him, or at least I tried to. But years went by. 10 years. 20 years. 30. And still every night he left. Sometimes for 1 hour, sometimes for 3, always after 9 p.m., always alone. I asked him once, gently, "Richard, where do you go every night?" He smiled, that same soft smile that made me fall for him, and said, "Just taking care of something, Evie. Don't worry your pretty little head." Pretty little head. I laughed with him, but inside, my heart felt tight, because a wife knows when something being hidden. We never had children. Doctors said it wasn't possible, so it was just the two of us in that quiet suburban house in Ohio, me cooking dinner, him reading the paper, him leaving into the night. I told myself stories to feel better. Maybe he's planning a surprise anniversary trip. Maybe he's doing charity work. Maybe he's visiting an old friend who needs him. But some nights, I stood at the window, watching his car disappear, feeling like I was waving goodbye to a stranger. Then last winter, Richard had a heart attack. No warning, no goodbye, no final explanation. One moment he was drinking coffee at the kitchen table. The next, he was gone. At the funeral, neighbors hugged me. Friends cried. They told me what a wonderful man he was, what a devoted husband. I nodded, I smiled politely, I thanked them. But inside, one thought screamed louder than grief. Where did he go every night? A week after the funeral, while cleaning the house, I noticed something strange. A small door in the basement wall. A door I had never seen before. And when I touched the handle, my hands started shaking. Because somehow, deep in my bones, I knew. Richard's secret was waiting behind that door. I stood in front of that little basement door for a long time. My house was silent, too silent, the kind of quiet that screams in your ears. My hand hovered over the handle, trembling like I'd just touched a live wire. Richard had never mentioned this door, not once. And in 30 years of marriage, I'd never gone poking around in the basement. That was his space, his rule. I swallowed hard and twisted the knob. The door opened with a soft click. Behind it was a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. A faint light glowed at the bottom, like a heartbeat refusing to stop. I took a step down, then another. The air smelled different down there, old paper, dust, and something else, something almost sweet, like baby powder. At the bottom, I froze. It was a room, a small, carefully kept room, painted soft blue, a tiny bed against the wall, a shelf full of children's books, stuffed animals, a little wooden rocking horse. My knees nearly gave out. Because this wasn't storage. This was a child's room. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. I walked forward slowly, touching the blanket on the bed. It was neatly folded, clean, loved. On the wall were photographs. Dozens of them. Richard holding a little boy. Richard pushing that same boy on a swing. Richard teaching him to ride a bike. And in every picture, the boy had Richard's eyes. I covered my mouth with my hand. We never had children. That was the story I'd lived with for decades. That was the grief I carried quietly every Mother's Day. But here, right in front of me, was proof that Richard had been a father all along. A father without me. On a small desk sat a stack of notebooks, Richard's handwriting, the same handwriting that once wrote me love letters. I opened the first one. Tonight I saw him again. He's growing so fast. I wish Evelyn could know the truth, but I'm too afraid to lose her. My vision blurred with tears. Lose me. After 30 years of lies. I flipped through more pages, years of entries, years of secret visits, years of another life I never knew existed. And on the very last page, written just days before his death, were words that made my blood run cold. Tomorrow, I will finally tell Evelyn everything. She deserves the truth. If I don't, she will find the room. My hands shook so violently, the notebook fell to the floor. He was going to tell me, but he died before he could. And now, I needed to know one thing. Who was that child? And more importantly, where was he now? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, Richard's notebook spread out in front of me, my coffee going cold. Page after page, I read about a life he'd lived without me. A boy named Ethan. Born 30 years ago, the same year Richard and I were told we'd never have children. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. In one entry, Richard wrote, "Ethan's mother doesn't want me in their life, but I can't stay away. I see him every night after he sleeps. I promised myself I'd always be there, even if from the shadows." Shadows. That's where my husband had lived for 3 decades, half in my world, half in another. I kept reading. He mentioned an address, over and over, like a sacred place. 742, Willow Creek Drive. I stared at that line until the numbers blurred. Then I grabbed my coat. Snow was falling outside. I hadn't driven at night in years, but something stronger than fear pushed me forward. I drove across town, hands tight on the steering wheel, heart hammering like it wanted out of my chest. When I reached Willow Creek Drive, my stomach dropped. It was a small, warm-looking house. Christmas lights still hung on the porch. A child's bike leaned against the wall. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the window glow from inside. A family lived there. A life Richard had been part of. A life I had never touched. Finally, I forced myself out of the car and walked to the door. My legs felt weak. My hand shook as I rang the bell. Footsteps, a lock turning. The door opened. A young man stood there, late 20s, broad shoulders, dark hair. And Richard's eyes. We stared at each other, frozen in silence. He spoke first. "Can I help you, ma'am?" My throat closed, tears burned in my eyes. I whispered, "My name is Evelyn Parker." His face changed in an instant. Confusion, shock, fear. Then he said the words that cut straight through my heart. "I've been expecting you." I didn't know whether to run or fall to my knees. The young man stepped aside slowly and said, "Please come in." His voice sounded polite, but nervous, just like Richard's used to when he was hiding something. I walked into the living room. It smelled of fresh laundry and coffee. Family photos lined the walls. A woman's laughter drifted from the kitchen. A child's voice followed. This wasn't just a house. This was a life Richard had built behind my back. The young man, Ethan, gestured to the couch. I sat down carefully, like I might break. He sat across from me, rubbing his palms together. "I know who you are," he said quietly. "Dad told me about you." Dad? Hearing another person call my husband Dad hit me harder than any slap. I swallowed. Why didn't he ever tell me about you? Ethan looked away, eyes filling. He wanted to, for years, but my mother, she made him choose. My heart thudded painfully. Ethan took a deep breath. "When I was born, Dad was still married to you. My mother didn't know at first. When she found out, she said if he stayed in my life, he could never tell you about me. She was afraid you'd take him away, or that I'd be rejected. So Dad agreed. He said it was the only way to keep both of us." Tears rolled down my cheeks. 30 years. 30 years of secret visits, secret love, secret pain. Ethan continued, voice cracking. "He came every night after I went to bed. He'd sit in my room, talk to me while I slept, read me stories, fix my toys, help with school projects. I thought all dads did that." My hands clenched in my lap. While I sat alone every night, wondering where my husband went, he was reading bedtime stories to a child I never knew existed. Anger rose inside me, hot, sharp, shaking. "So I was just the wife at home," I whispered. "The woman who washed his clothes and made his dinner while he lived a second life." Ethan's eyes dropped. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Parker. He loved you. He really did. He said you were the best thing that ever happened to him." I laughed bitterly through tears. Then, why did he lie to me every night for 30 years? Silence filled the room. Then Ethan stood up slowly and walked to a cabinet. He pulled out a small wooden box and placed it in my hands. "Dad told me, if you ever came, to give you this." My fingers trembled as I opened the box. Inside was a ring and a folded note in Richard's handwriting. "I hope one day you can forgive me." My breath caught in my chest, because in that moment, I realized something even more painful. Richard had planned for this meeting. He knew one day the truth would find me. I held Richard's ring in my palm, the same ring I had slipped onto his finger 42 years ago, standing in a small church with shaking hands and a heart full of dreams. Now it sat in a stranger's living room, in a life I never knew existed. My fingers closed around it so tight it hurt. "I waited for him every night," I said softly. "Every single night. I cooked for him. I worried about him. I asked God to keep him safe on those roads, and all that time he was here." Ethan's voice was gentle. "He never missed a night with you either. He came home every time." I turned to him sharply. "You think that makes it better?" I snapped. "That he lied to both of us?" His face crumbled. "No, ma'am, I think he was a coward, a loving coward, but still a coward." I stared at him. For the first time, I didn't just see Richard's eyes. I saw a man carrying the same pain I was. Two people betrayed by the same secret. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. "Where is your mother?" I asked. Ethan hesitated. "She left years ago. New husband, new family, Dad stayed. He raised me alone." My anger shifted, twisted, deepened. Richard chose to stay in this hidden life, but he never chose to bring me into it. I stood up slowly, legs shaking. "I need to see the room," I said. Ethan looked confused. "What room?" "The one he built, the one I found, the one where he loved you in secret." Understanding hit Ethan's face. He nodded. "I'll come with you." The drive back felt unreal, like I was watching my own life from outside my body. When we entered my house, the basement air felt colder than before. I opened the secret door again. Ethan froze at the bottom of the stairs. "That's my room," he whispered. He walked in, touching the small bed, the shelf, the rocking horse. "I haven't seen this since I was 5, he said. "Dad said it was too risky to bring me here again." Tears fell freely now, from both of us. I reached into the drawer and pulled out the last notebook, opened to the final entry. "If Evelyn ever forgives me, I pray she will love Ethan like her own. He deserves family." I closed the notebook slowly. Then I turned to Ethan and said the words that shocked even me. "You're not leaving this house alone tonight." Ethan's eyes widened. "Because whether Richard told me or not, you are part of my life now." That night, I made dinner for 2. It felt strange placing an extra plate on the table again, but this time, someone actually sat there. Someone who carried my husband's smile in his eyes. Ethan barely touched his food. Neither did I, but the silence between us felt different than the lonely silence I'd lived with for years. After dinner, he stood in the doorway of the small blue room. "Is it okay if I sleep here?" he asked softly. I nodded. "That room was waiting for you." As I turned off the light, I whispered, "Good night, Ethan." And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel alone in the house. The next morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. Ethan was already awake, fixing coffee like he'd done it 100 times before. We sat together, quiet but peaceful. Then Ethan said something that changed everything. "There's more," he said. I froze. "More what?" He pulled out his phone and showed me an email. Subject line, "Regarding Richard Parker's property." My hands shook as I read. Mrs. Evelyn Parker, we are contacting you concerning a property purchased under your late husband's name 15 years ago. A property. Richard and I barely afforded this house. How had he bought another? Ethan explained, Dad bought a small house on the edge of town. He said it was for my future. He never told me where the money came from. He just said, one day you and Evelyn will need this. I felt dizzy. Another house, another secret. How many hidden lives had Richard lived? My voice came out barely above a whisper. We're going to see that house. 2 hours later, we stood in front of a worn white cottage surrounded by tall grass. The windows were boarded. The porch sagged. It looked abandoned. Ethan unlocked the door with a key his father had mailed him years ago. Inside, dust floated in the air. Old furniture sat covered in sheets. And on the wall of the living room was a giant framed photograph. Richard, me, and Ethan, together, smiling like a real family. My knees buckled, because I knew in that instant, Richard hadn't just planned a secret life. He had planned a future where we were all together. But something had stopped him, something he'd never written down. And now, standing in that empty house, I realized there was still one last secret left. I stared at that photograph until my vision blurred. Richard's arm was around me. My hand rested on Ethan's shoulder. We looked like a perfect family, the one I never had. But it wasn't real. It was a dream he'd printed and hung in an empty house. A dream that never came true. Ethan gently lifted the frame off the wall. Behind it was a small safe built into the plaster. Richard never did anything halfway. Even his secrets had secrets. Inside the safe were more papers, medical files, letters, one envelope with my name written in bold, careful handwriting. For Evelyn, only if you find everything. My fingers shook as I opened it. My dearest Evie, if you're reading this, it means I failed to tell you the truth in life. I'm so sorry. I want you to know why I never brought you and Ethan together. I swallowed hard and kept reading. When Ethan was 5, doctors told me he had a heart condition. They said he might not live to adulthood. His mother left. I was terrified. I thought if I brought him into our life, you would love him and then lose him. I couldn't bear the thought of you burying a child. Tears dripped onto the paper. So I chose to love him from a distance. I built a life for him. I watched him grow. I prayed every night that he'd live long enough for me to fix everything. I looked up at Ethan. His face was pale. His hands were trembling. I never told him how sick he was. I didn't want him to live in fear, but I also never told you, and that is my greatest sin. The letter continued. If you're reading this, Ethan survived. My prayers were answered, and now I beg you love him, forgive him, and if you can, forgive me. I lowered the letter slowly. All my anger, all my bitterness, all my hurt. It didn't disappear, but it changed shape. Because suddenly, I saw the man behind the lies. A father terrified of losing his son. A husband terrified of breaking his wife. A man who chose the wrong path for what he thought were the right reasons. Ethan wiped his eyes. I didn't even know I was sick, he whispered. Dad saved me but lost you in the process. I reached out and held his hand. We both lost something, I said, but you're here now. That means we can still build something. Just then, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Hello. His face changed as he listened. Shock, fear, disbelief. He slowly handed me the phone. Mrs. Parker, the doctor's office says they found something in Ethan's recent tests. My heart dropped, because I knew exactly what that meant. Richard's secret wasn't over. Not yet. I grabbed my coat. Ethan grabbed his. We didn't speak on the drive to the clinic. The heater was on, but I felt cold to my bones. In the waiting room, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of disinfectant reminded me of the hospital the day Richard died. A nurse finally called Ethan's name. I stood up with him. The nurse hesitated. Only family allowed inside. I lifted my chin. I am family. She nodded and let us through. The doctor was a young woman with tired eyes. She pulled up Ethan's file and took a deep breath. "Ethan," she said gently, "your father brought you here as a child. You had a congenital heart condition. It was monitored until you turned 18. Then you stopped coming." Ethan looked stunned. "I didn't even know," he whispered. The doctor continued. "Your recent blood work shows stress markers on the heart again. We need more tests. Immediately." The room spun. Ethan gripped the edge of the chair. I placed my hand on his shoulder. He wasn't just Richard's son. He was the child I never had. The child I lost before I ever knew him. Outside in the hallway, Ethan leaned against the wall, shaking. "What if I'm dying?" he asked quietly. I stared at him. And suddenly, I wasn't a betrayed wife anymore. I was a mother. I took his face in my hands. "Listen to me," I said. "You're not facing this alone, not anymore, not ever again." He broke down then, full sobs, like a scared little boy who'd finally run out of strength. I held him, right there in the hospital hallway. People stared. I didn't care. Because love doesn't ask permission. Later that evening, back at home, I tucked him into the small blue room. The room his father built in secret. Now a room filled with truth. As I turned off the light, Ethan whispered, "Thank you, Mom." I froze. Mom. The word I thought I'd never hear in my lifetime. My voice cracked. "Good night, son." I closed the door, leaned against it, and cried silently. But my heart wasn't breaking this time. It was healing. Downstairs, I walked into the living room. And stopped. Because on the coffee table sat an envelope I had never seen before. Addressed to me. Written in Richard's handwriting. But dated after his death. I stared at the envelope on the coffee table like it might bite. Richard's handwriting. My name. But the date, 2 weeks after his death. My fingers shook as I tore it open. Inside was a letter, and a small silver key taped to the bottom. I unfolded the paper. My Evie. If you're reading this letter, it means Ethan is in your life now. That means you found the room, the house, and the truth. I'm sorry you had to learn it this way. I swallowed hard and kept reading. I recorded this letter before my heart gave out. I asked a lawyer friend to mail it only after my death. I knew I'd run out of time to fix my mistakes. Tears slid down my cheeks. I want you to know something important. I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. My secret wasn't about choosing one family over another. It was about fear of losing both. I pressed the paper to my chest. Then I read the next lines. There is one last thing you need to see. Use the key. Behind the grandfather clock in the secret house. Forgive me if you can. My breath caught. Another secret. One last one. The next morning, Ethan and I drove back to the hidden house. The sky was gray. The wind cut through my coat. Inside, the house felt colder than before. We walked to the grandfather clock in the corner of the living room. Ethan helped me move it aside. Behind it was a small locked panel in the wall. My hands trembled as I slid in the silver key. Click. The panel opened. Inside was a metal box, heavy, old, important. Ethan lifted it out carefully and set it on the floor. We opened it together. Inside were stacks of documents, bank papers, property deeds, and a final envelope labeled, "For Evelyn and Ethan, our future." I opened it slowly. Everything in this box belongs to you both. The houses, the savings, the investments. I spent my life building security for the two people I loved most. I hope this gives you a chance to live without fear. Together. I sank to the floor. Not from shock this time, but from understanding. Richard didn't leave me for another life. He carried 2 lives on his shoulders, alone. He made terrible choices. He hurt me deeply, but in his broken way, he tried to protect us both. Ethan sat beside me. "We're really family now," he said softly. I nodded. "Yes, we are." That night, back at home, I stood in the doorway of the blue room, watching Ethan sleep. The house felt warm, full, alive. But just as I turned away, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text message. "You think Richard's secrets are over. Think again." My blood turned cold. Because I knew. This story wasn't finished yet. I didn't reply to the message. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. My heart beat fast, but not like before, not with fear. With strength. I walked into the blue room and sat beside Ethan. I watched him sleep, steady breathing, warm blanket, safe. Whatever new secret was out there, I wouldn't let it take him away from me. The next morning, we went to the police station. I showed them the message. They traced the number. It led to one person. Ethan's mother. A woman named Claire Bennett. She had moved back into town 2 weeks ago. The same time, Richard's post-death letter arrived. My stomach turned. That afternoon, there was a knock at my door. I opened it. A woman stood there, late 50s, sharp eyes, perfect hair, expensive coat. She smiled without warmth. "Evelyn Parker," she said, "we need to talk about my son." I didn't step aside. "Your son," I said calmly. "He's in my house, he's under my care, and he's an adult who chooses where he lives." Her smile faded. "You don't understand," she hissed. "Richard left money, property, that belongs to me too." So that was the final secret. Not love. Not family. Greed. I looked her straight in the eye. "You left your child. You signed your rights away. You don't get to show up now and steal from the life you abandoned." Her face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this, old woman." I leaned forward slightly. "With all due respect, sweetheart, I've already survived worse." I closed the door. Locked it. Then walked to the kitchen where Ethan sat. "It's over," I said. He looked up. "Really?" I nodded. "Yes, your father's secrets ended last night. From now on, we live in the truth." Ethan smiled, a real smile, free, light. "Then let's start fresh," he said. And for the first time in 40 years, I finally felt at peace.